close their eyes for a minute, and we're going to go into the time machine, and we're going to set the time machine for 1890. Everybody with me? So what would an afternoon tea be without a Victorian etiquette lesson? So today we're very fortunate to have Mrs. Russell Parsons, who is the etiquette expert of 1890, joining us today. So sip and nibble as you learn the secrets of a Victorian lady and gentleman. And the etiquette expert today will be portrayed by Janet Parsons of historical portrayals by Lady Jack.
Boys' hair is too long, and telephones have become smart. Surely something is amiss in 2018. What you need is a good dose of Victorian decorum and common sense. I have come to provide it. My name is Mrs. Russell Parsons. I've just stepped in from 1890 to escort you on a little promenade through my life as a proper Victorian lady. But the trip has been a bit arduous. I fear I have been afflicted with a slight case of the vapors. So if you will allow me, we will stay in 2018 for a bit and talk tea. Those of you who appreciate the pleasures of afternoon tea have Anna, the 7th Duchess of Bedford, to thank. You see, early in the 1800s, the dinner hour was changed from 2 o'clock in the afternoon to 8 o'clock in the evening, with no accommodation for nourishment made in the meanwhile. As such, by 4 p.m., the poor Duchess found herself feeling a bit peaked, so she would ask her maid to please bring her a cup of tea and a biscuit. Well, it occurred to the Duchess that this daily ritual would be far more enjoyable if she had some friends join her. Before long, the entire English Empire was enjoying afternoon tea. As the tea tradition evolved, there came to be several types of afternoon tea. First, we have simple tea, which is quite simply tea with a biscuit or scone. Then we have full tea. Full tea mandates the addition of tea sandwiches. And then there is royal tea. Royal tea allows for the addition of a small glass of sherry or champagne. And then we have high tea. High tea being the most misunderstood of all the teas. For high tea was originally a meal. It was designed to feed the farmers and factory workers in the afternoon. As such, it consisted of meat or meat pies and fruits, vegetables, desserts. Hardly the delicate event some think it to be in 2018. No matter what type of tea event you prefer, though, there are certain protocols that ought to be followed when serving and consuming tea. First of all, ladies, if you are hosting but a few friends, it is perfectly acceptable for you to pour. If, however, you and your husband are hosting a reception, then you must ask someone else to do the honors, perhaps a sister or dear friend, never a servant, so that you may park yourself at the front door, greet your guests, and accept their parasols and wraps. Now, tea is served on the side table of the dining room. There you have a pot of tea, along with a pot of hot water for those with more muted tea preferences. Then you have sugar and, of course, thin slices of lemon. When we pour tea, we do not do as we do with coffee. That is, pour several cups and then hand them to our guests. No. With tea, we pour 1 cup at a time and hand it. The reason? Tea cools far more quickly than coffee. And as we all know, nobody appreciates a tepid cup of tea. Now, when consuming tea, if you are seated at the table, it is perfectly acceptable to lift only the cup. However, if you are standing, lift both cup and saucer. The reason, of course, is that the opportunity for spillage increases with the distance that you must raise the cup. And when stirring your tea, ladies and gentlemen, we stir discreetly, not creating a tea symphony. Now, if you're of those who prefer milk in your tea, pour the cup of tea, Then add the milk. This way you can determine by the color the amount of milk to add. If you are of those who prefer lemon and sugar, add the sugar first, then stir until it is completely dissolved. Then add the lemon. The reason for this is that the citric acid in the lemon can prevent the sugar from dissolving. Have you ever enjoyed a perfectly lovely cup of tea, only to find that mortifying little amount of sugar at the bottom of your cup when you finish? I see you have. Assuredly, you have not sufficiently stirred in order to allow the sugar to dissolve. Now, the tea tradition lost a bit of steam as it transited the Atlantic. For here in the United States, we do not have daily tea. We do, however, have tea parties, which are arguably one of life's delights and fall squarely within the domain of the ladies. Oh, I feel quite revived. I think it is time we travel back in time. Oh, you are afraid. Oh, no need. Ladies, simply raise your skirts, always to the right, below the ankle, please. Gentlemen, tip your hat, and we shall travel back in time. Oh, I'm so delighted you could all join me for afternoon tea. Carve time out of your busy schedules. And Amelia, my dear, I do wish to compliment you on that reception you and Mr. Thompson hosted. And your gown, my dear, it was positively ravishing. Did your husband allow you to splurge and buy a Paris original? No? Well, I will say, your gown is every bit as beautiful as any Parisian gown I have ever seen, no matter what Phyllis Thomas says about tawdry imitation. Oh. But I must confide in you, and only because we are dear friends do I do this, but I'm quite concerned, a bit confused, and a little scared. You see, life is changing so quickly, I can scarcely keep up. Do you know there are mothers who are no longer making the clothing for their children? They are buying the clothing from something called the Bloomingdale Catalog? Now I ask you, how many ladies making hundreds of dresses for nobody knows who could create something with as much detail as this, as I made for my daughter when she was 5? You see, this is all hand done. All the handwork.
Oh, I didn't see the dress.
I was going to say I should pass those. No.
Thank you. A labor of love it was, but of course, as all of you know, a mother's efforts are endless.
Did you make?
I suppose certainly did, and all this is all hand. This is all hand done.
That's all the other.
It is all hand done. Indeed, there is a dearth of housekeeping acumen amongst the young ladies of today. And do you know why? They are too busy carousing with the gentlemen. Whoops. So excited there. But they are even attending college. Now, do not misunderstand me. I do applaud the education of young ladies. However, it does concern me when this happens at the expense of the family. I wonder what Queen Victoria thinks about this. You know, the Queen of England. Some say she's the greatest monarch England has ever had. I say she's the greatest England probably ever will have. But you see, it is Queen Victoria who has infused society with those ideals we so cherish. Ideals such as honesty, good deeds, and responsibility. But Queen Victoria was a model wife, mother, and sovereign. As a wife, well, you all know that she married her husband, Prince Albert, or cousin, rather, Prince Albert, when they were in their early 20s. And for around 20 years, they adored each other. You see, Queen Victoria did not treat Albert as a subject, but rather as a partner. She consulted with him on many affairs of state. She even put him in charge of the World's Fair of 1851. Sadly, though, that led to his demise. He fell ill with typhus and died at the age of 42. People still remember the scream that ran through the palace. And to this day, some 40 years later, Queen Victoria still wears mourning black. If that is not enough to convince you of the love that Queen Victoria and Albert shared, note that they had 9 children. Oh, you've all seen photographs of the royal family. The 2 adoring parents, the 9 angelic little children. If the truth be told, it is rumored that Queen Victoria is not too fond of small children. She once referred to babies as nasty little things. However, when her eldest daughter was to marry and move abroad, the Queen confided in a friend that she did not know how she would ever live without her. So you may choose to believe that Queen Victoria is a loving parent or not. When it comes to her subjects, though, there is no question about her concern and love for them and devotion to them. For example, well, you know that Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, they're both great outdoors people. So to encourage their subjects to spend more time in the fresh air, they built parks around England. There was a story around one of these. There was a fair in one of these parks, and one of the events was a tight rope walk. A young lady was to walk a rope 50 feet above the ground. The rope had rotted, but the young lady was forced to walk it anyway, and she fell to her death. The mayor mandated the mess be cleaned up, for the show must go on. He later received a terse note from Queen Victoria telling him she hoped she would never hear of anyone treating her subjects with such callousness. And although Queen Victoria, she is able to navigate the pomp and circumstance of Windsor Castle, she much prefers to be in the company of the common folk. One time she was on a naval vessel touring the coast of Scotland. The Queen was quite at ease, but the crew was not, and she could not understand why. She inquired, someone whispered in her ear, "Your Majesty, you are sitting on the grog cupboard." Now, what, I ask you, is a sailor to do when there is a queen between him and his grog? So Queen Victoria made an arrangement with the crew. She would come down if they would share. So she was helped down off the cupboard and handed a cup of the brew along with a rousing cheer. So you can understand why the Queen is so beloved. And people visiting Windsor Castle would wonder why there were 30 or 40 chickens and ducks in the fire when there were only 7 people for dinner. Of course, they gave these to the poor. A little girl once visited Windsor Castle and reported that Queen Victoria eats chicken with her fingers. Now that may be true in the privacy of the family quarters, but in public, the Queen mandates strict adherence to the Code of Etiquette. Oh, the Code of Etiquette. It is the framework we use to nudge people towards those ideals, honesty, responsibility, and good deeds. Notice I say, we nudge the people. Who is the we? The gentlemen? You think? Of course not. It is the ladies, of course. As such ladies, we must be intimately familiar with the Code of Etiquette. If anyone tries to tell you that it is but a silly whim, let them know it is based on a compilation written by George Washington. He wrote 100 Ways to Behave in Polite Society. There is a code or rule for virtually every social interaction. For example, if one is having a conversation, listen, know what not to say, and speak your opinion intelligibly and concisely. When shopping, keep the voice low, be respectful of the clerk, and do not denigrate the goods in front of you. Ladies, please refrain from chasing carriages and chewing on the handles of your parasol. Both are most unseemly. And of course, a gentleman would never stand on the street corner and watch the ladies pass by. That would be most disrespectful. So no matter how we choose to behave in the privacy of our homes, it is hoped that people from every class will defer to the Code of Etiquette when in public. You see, when we follow this code, it mitigates the opportunities to offend or to become offended. As teachers and enforcers of the Code of Etiquette, ladies, we must start teaching our children when they are young. This applies particularly to little boys. For if little boys are allowed to do whatever they please, and they grow up without any regard for the comfort of those around them or the delicacy of the ladies. Think of the possible consequences. Why, if you were in a theater with such an ill-bred gentleman and that theater were to fill with smoke, he would be running out the door, stepping over you on the floor.
I hope not.
If you were on a train and there was but one seat, he would be in the seat, you would be on your feet. Or if there was a terrible flood and there was but one space left in the boat, he would be in the boat, you would be told to float. So you see, it is important that we start teaching our children when they are young. Oh, my mother did. For years I thought it a tremendous waste of her time. She could be doing so many things that are more productive. I thought that way until I reached the age of 16. It was time for me to start looking for a husband. A task that is at the one time daunting yet delicious. Now, Professor Hill, who is an authority on social conduct, has some advice for ladies and gentlemen seeking a mate. They say they ought to seek someone who shares their values and experience, but at the same time is their opposite. So you see, if a young lady has light blonde hair, she would seek a gentleman with dark chestnut brown or black hair. A gentleman with a large nose would seek out a young lady with delicate facial features. One who has a fiery temperament would seek a mate with a more sanguine disposition, and on and on. The reason for this? If opposites marry, the children will be the embodiment of moderation. More important than all of this, though, is that the objects of one's desire meets the approval of the parents. There can be consequences to pay for heedlessness in this area. Take my friend Elizabeth. Elizabeth was disembarking from a carriage one afternoon when she tripped. Why, that young lady would have fallen flat on her fan but for a gentleman who came to her aid. Oh, Elizabeth noticed that this gentleman was quite good-looking, strong, and certainly well-bred. By the end of the encounter, she was certain she would be receiving a love letter. So she danced home to tell her parents. When her parents heard the young man's name, they said, "But Elizabeth, this young man is the son of a cobbler." Now, a cobbler holds a very respectable position in society, certainly, but you are the daughter of a bank president. If you should marry, there will be terrible obstacles to overcome. So the parents suggested that Elizabeth seek a mate elsewhere. Elizabeth would do no such thing. If this gentleman wanted to keep company with her and she was forbidden, she would sit in a room until she is 34. The parents tried reasoning, wheedling, to no avail. Trying to avoid a family conflagration, the mother thought. It occurred to her that her aunt would soon be taking an extended trip abroad. So the mother went to visit the aunt. She explained the situation. The aunt immediately comprehended the delicacy of the circumstance and suggested that she might like to have a young companion join her. So Elizabeth was given the option of touring the great cities of Europe, Venice, Paris, Vienna, or sitting in a room until she is 34. As you can imagine, that is one romance that never did quite come to bloom. It is not necessary, however, to fall out of a carriage in order to meet suitable ladies and gentlemen. What are some acceptable ways of meeting one's mate? Religious services? Most certainly. A reception or dinner? Yes. An introduction by a friend? All are most acceptable. There is one way, however, that is coming into favor with which Professor Hill and I have grave concerns. It is called the personal advertisement. I read one in the paper the other day. Well, the young lady in the blue suit who was walking a dog past the Charles Bank at 4:15 on April 20th. Please call DB at the Herald. Now, I assure you, there was many a young lady who went rushing to her closet and blew the dust off her blue suit. Others rented a dog to bark in the background as they made that call. I would not, however, for I never know what kind of creature might be at the other end of the phone line. Oh, no. I prefer to meet gentlemen at a ball when I would be dressed in my finest. Now, Professor Hill has some advice for those attending a ball. There are certain protocols that ought to be followed. For example, a married lady never enters, crosses, or exits a ballroom unescorted. And ladies, do bring 2 pairs of gloves, one to wear to the ball. The gloves are removed while you dine, and then you don't put on a second pair for dancing. And a gentleman, of course, always wears a pair of white gloves. Professor Hill also advises that when we enter the ballroom, we survey the crowd to see who might be suitable for companionship for the evening. Oh, I remember one evening. I saw a young man in the corner. He was tall with a shock of dark hair, bright smile, and he must have been very intelligent, for all hovered as if to capture every word he said. I thought, oh, he might make for a suitable companion for the evening. Perhaps I can arrange for an introduction. Then my brother whispered in my ear that this gentleman was already keeping company with Edith Wilson, Margaret Brown, and Weena King, neither one knowing about the other. So I continued my search, and as I did, I refined the art of being a young lady at a ball. For a young lady at a ball is at the one time alluring, yet aloof, a bit flirtatious, but never ever forward. As such, the fan is an indispensable tool. Now, fans are made from a variety of materials: paper, lace, feathers, eyelet. And a fan, of course, is designed to keep a lady cool, but it also is used to communicate. So, ladies, if you're at a ball and a gentleman raises his left forefinger to his left eye and catches your attention, what is he asking? Gentlemen, you know not? Gentlemen, you are asking the young lady if you may escort her home. Young lady, if you wish to say yes, you rest your fan on your right cheek. If you wish to say no, on the left cheek. If you wish this gentleman to turn on his heels and never look your way again, close your fan and tap it with your right forefinger. Mother says no. Fan in front of the face means I would like to meet you. You have my heart. You have changed. And the ever important, they are watching us. Flowers also are used to communicate. And sometimes there may be a bouquet where you would send several messages. But I liked this form of communication. And I like it for the simple reason that it allows a lady to decline an invitation without the embarrassment of a face-to-face event, a face-to-face conversation, which can cause embarrassment for both parties. So ladies, do brush up on your fan language. One evening, through no effort on my own, I was at a ball. I saw a gentleman start to raise his left forefinger. I started to fan myself very slowly, for this told him that I was engaged. Had I fanned myself quickly, it would have told him I was married.
Oh my goodness.
I was engaged to Mr. Russell Parsons, a rising star at the local bank. And 1 year later, we were married. As the wife of Mr. Russell Parsons, it was my duty to provide a home, a place that would be a sanctuary, a retreat from the toil and troubles of the outside world, a place that would be so replete with harmony, love, and tranquility that my husband would find no reason to seek refuge elsewhere, if you know what I mean. So, of course, I started to decorate my home. As one of our ideals is frugality, I foraged the fields and forests to create decorative wall hangings, but of course we also had to purchase furniture. In fact, I will show you some photographs of our home. Pardon my back. We have here the foyer. You can see the dark, rich woods. And then we have the front parlor. The front parlor is quite ornate. For the front parlor is the room in which we entertain company. We entertain people. And there's the front foyer. There's a front foyer. We have very often in the front parlor there will be a piano, and when there is a reception, a young lady will be asked if she would like to play. For most young ladies do play a musical instrument. This is the front foyer. You can see the dark, rich woods. We have the front parlor. Front foyer and front parlor. have the front foyer here. Would also be an umbrella stand in this front foyer. You can see the dark, rich mahogany type woods. Then we have here front foyer and the front parlor. Then we have the back parlor. In stark contrast to the front parlor, the back parlor is quite austere. You might say simple. The reason is that the back parlor is the room in which the family gathers on Sunday evenings. So there are no guests in the back parlor. In the center of the back parlor, there is a table. On that table, there would often be, that in older days, there was a Bible. When I was a child, there was a Bible. Now, since there is the oncoming of this company called Parker Brothers, very often there is a game on this table. So instead of telling stories that hold a moral truth, we are playing Monopoly. We have the front parlor here. The back parlor here.
I was thinking that.
And then we have
We have a chance, maybe.
the dining room. The dining room. The dining room is ornate because that is where we entertain. If you have ever seen a properly laid Victorian table, you know that there's a utensil for virtually every food imaginable. So the afternoon tea will be served off the side table in the dining room. And this is the ladies' bedroom. So the bedroom is not only a place where a lady sleeps, her sewing machine may be in the bedroom, it is also a room in which ladies will retire after dinner. The gentlemen will go to the library, the ladies will go to the ladies' bedroom. So it serves multiple purposes.
Too many rules.
How many servants?
Well, not too many, for the simple reason that people prefer to work in factories now instead of domestic situations. So then I have only one part-time servant. Who are me?
I've never done that before. Just what I need you to do. Excuse me, please.
The dining room, the side
That's what my
table,
kids would do.
and the ladies' bedroom. And of course, if I'm to walk down the street on the arm of Mr. Parsons, I have to pay particular attention to my toilette or my wardrobe. So let me show you some photographs. They'll give you some ideas, ladies. I may show these and then pass these around. I think that might work a little bit better. So this is the visiting toilet. You can see very simple lines. We do not want to be ostentatious when we visit, but we want to look demure and elegant. And then in the back is a walking suit. Now the walking suit often features a skirt that is just a little bit shorter than an average. The reason for this is that men tend to spit on the street. A lady does not want the hem of her dress to be trailing through anonymous spit. So the skirt may be just a bit shorter.
Oh, dear.
This is for when I go on promenade. When I go on promenade, I am out to impress. I pretend that I'm not out to impress, but of course I am. And then we have a traveling toilet. Now when we travel, ladies, we wear a toilet that is made of something that will not collect dust. So we would not wear something made of velvet. Then we have a gown for a dinner reception. Now you will notice when you look at these drawings that when the sun sets, the necklines plunge and the sleeves rise. And on the back we have a ball gown.
Wait, look at the size of that waist.
And now I have some other photographs of ball gowns. This being the most surprising.
How do you sit down?
This is actually worn in 1892. One would consider it next to obscene. It's fashioned after Madame X, that painting. Then I can try.
Yes, that's demure.
Would be awful. Say no man's worth it.
I'm gonna just start some of these. Start one here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's quite all right. Start one just.
Stand up all the time.
I'd like to see it without face.
And then of course, we need to have accessories, which would include a reticule. This is worn under the clothing. It is not meant to be seen. Unlike the suitcases that ladies today carry in 2018. It's meant to be discreet. We have hats. Now a lady's hat, if you wish to be very fashionable, ladies, wear a hat with the bird's nest in it. That way, as you walk down the street, the butterflies and the birds will fly in and out of your hat. It is considered very fashionable. The gentleman, of course, wears his hat. A gentleman's hat is designed to be tipped. So a gentleman tips his hat when he is in the presence of ladies. So if he is with a lady and acknowledges another gentleman, he tips his hat. If he is walking down the street and encounters a group of ladies, he tips his hat. Tipping the hat means lifting it off the head. If, gentlemen, you simply tickle the rim, a lady will see you as lazy and not for her. This particular hat is easy to store, for it simply And then, of course, we come to, let's do this first.
Sally.
Particular dresses. This is a particular dress. This is a hand-sewn dress. So you can see, it is of silk, and you can see all the pleats are exactly the same width. As you can see, it has been worn a bit.
Joanne, this is pretty.
No. And many buttons down the back. Or it might be a taffeta, actually. This is all hand-stitched. Of course, now we have the sewing machines to make making clothes so much easier.
That one was rather austere.
This is a simple gauge dress.
Joanne, have you seen this?
Nothing terribly fancy.
Terrible.
You can see all these buttons down the back. Oh, yeah. Pleats are also symmetrical. I'm sure how, have you seen this? You can see the pleats are also symmetrical. It's quite fragile.
No, what she said. They didn't wear them. They didn't want them.
Then we have a tea gown. Yeah, we have it's all handiwork.
Yeah, that's gorgeous.
Lovely. And it is also perfect.
That's beautiful.
Does that have covered?
Covered, yes, covered by
Oh my goodness, gorgeous.
Right, it's not stained.
Oh, you stood though.
Because you couldn't.
What's the material? Turn the chair sideways.
A type of cotton. It's a type of cotton. It is because it's thin because of age.
Oh, age.
The beauty of this dress is that ladies do not have to wear a corset. Which brings me to undergarments. And I'll be quite frank, although there are gentlemen in the room, quite frank. So, we have here a camisole. I'm showing you the back.
Oh, wow. got the work building to that.
I'm not certain. Actually, I'm not certain. Can't do less. It might have been a one. Here, camisole. And then we have pantalettes. Now pantalettes, a lady's pantalettes features something feminine at the hem, such as eyelet or lace. And you will see that there is a slit in the front for convenience. And then of course we have the corset. Well, actually, we have the corset. Of course, is designed to reduce the circumference of a lady's waist. There's actually an advertisement that guarantees this corset to reduce the waist to 15 inches. Now, ideally, when a lady is betrothed, her intended will be able to encircle his hands around her waist.
Thanks. Forget that.
Children start wearing corsets when they're very young, around the age of 2, both boys and girls. At that time, it is a soft swath of cotton that is loosely tied. By the time the boys reach 4 or 5, they discard the corset, but the girls continue to wear it, and it is pulled increasingly tighter and tighter. So by the time a young girl is 10 or 11, she is quite accustomed to having her waist cinched quite tightly. Of course, the reformers rail against the corset. They say it causes terrible problems with breathing. It displaces organs. When ladies were with child, they would try to obscure the fact by pulling the corset ever so tighter. Fortunately, at the end of the century, a designer came up with a loose-fitting camisole that ladies started wearing in place of the corset. And we have, and I've completely lost track. And then we have, let me see. We have this, and I've completely forgotten the term for this. Oh, back.
Bustle?
Bustle. Thank you. Then we have the bustle. Now bustles come in different configurations. Some come with, for some, it's simply a strap with a half moon of steel in the back that holds up the clothing. Others come in as a skirt with hoops. It looks very much like the skirt worn by the Queen of Hearts in Alice in Wonderland. And when you sit between the hoops. The purpose of the bustle is not only a fashion statement, but it is also functional. A lady's clothing can weigh as much as 12 pounds. The bustle helps to support the weight of the fabric. And bustles came in and out of fashion throughout from the early 1820s through 1879. They came in different forms, and you will see on some of those pictures that some were large and square. With other outfits, you saw hardly any bust at all. It would be small and round. So they came in and out of fashion. The corset, however, that continued even in the early 1900s. You remember the Gibson girl? The Gibson girl was fully corseted. My mother wore a form of corset, but not pulled so tightly. And then, of course, we have petticoats. We can show this. Corsets were made of denim, leather, different fabrics. So within 10 years of marriage, I found myself the mother of 7 children. 7 little ones. Of course, my husband and I did have 8, but little Daniel succumbed to diphtheria when he was 5. I am very sad over this, but I cannot really complain. You see, I do not know of a family that does not have at least one empty place at the dinner table. However, I prefer to concentrate on my 7 remaining children and the joys that they bring me. Now, you all know, as a mother, if any of you have ever had children, I was at the one time the cook, baker, seamstress, laundress. I was the nurse. I was a chemist. For times I had to mix my own medicines. I was able to do simple repairs around the house. I was the social activities director for my husband, myself, and our 7 children. So my day started at 5 a.m. At 10 a.m. I would go to bed. Supposedly, would read a book on self-improvement. In actuality, I read perhaps 2 sentences. The housework would have been daunting, but for some regiments that are printed. I use a regiment from Godey's Ladies' Book, a famous ladies' magazine. So, Monday was laundry, Tuesday ironing, Wednesday baking, Thursday sweeping, Friday cleaning of miscellaneous artifacts such as the brass in the fireplace, and Saturday was preparing for the Sunday meal. These tasks, in addition to the daily chores such as making the beds and preparing the meals, it took up my entire day. As such, it was difficult to leave the house to climb the social ladder. As such, I treasured my afternoon calls. The ladies and gentlemen each had a calling card, which would look something like, it would be about this size, a bit smaller. In the lower left side of the card, there would be something perhaps like Thursday 2 to 4. Those are the hours that the lady is available to receive callers. There are certain protocols for receiving callers and making calls. For receiving a caller, a servant answers the door with a receptacle in her hand, perhaps a plate or a platter. The caller drops her calling card onto the receptacle, and the servant retrieves the lady of the house. If there's anybody the lady does not wish to speak with, she informs the servant in advance. That way, there are no hurt feelings. When making a call, ladies, you do not stay more than 15 minutes unless expressly invited to do so. And a lady never calls on a gentleman unless he be an invalid. If you receive afternoon calls, it is expected that you will return them and do so in a timely manner. There can be consequences for heedlessness in this area, ladies. For example, my friend, Phyllis Newman, was walking along the street one afternoon when she passed the home of her friend Ann Champion. She noticed that the chimney was on fire. Of course, Phyllis's first thought was, oh my goodness, I must get help. And she went scurrying along the street trying to find a policeman or somebody to help. But then it occurred to her. She said, I paid a call on Ann on March 19th. It is now July 1st, and she has not yet returned that call. Knowing that the family was out of town, so the house was empty, Phyllis turned on her heels and started walking along the street, saying that will teach her to return my calls. So do return an afternoon call in about 2 weeks. If you have a dinner reception, again, you are expected to return that call, and you have probably 1 month. There is much to learn, is there not, about being a proper Victorian lady and gentleman? Though the times are so confusing, and they are ever-changing, there is not an era in which I would rather have been born. For you see, in the last half of the 1800s, we began and ended a civil war. We saw the invention of the bicycle and the sewing machine. We had the Great World's Fair of 1893. We dedicated the Statue of Liberty, a gift from France. If we look a little bit farther ahead towards 1900, we see the invention of a new dessert. And it is all the rave. One calls it Jell-O. We have grains of corn that have been turned into little flakes from a company called Kellogg Toast.
Cornflakes.
However, no matter how much we elevate our lifestyle and our style of living, the greatness of society will forever be measured by the attitudes and behaviors of its citizenry. It is my hope that the ladies and gentlemen, the parents of future generations, will embrace our ideals and pass along the code of etiquette to their children, so that every child of every generation will be able to say that he or she was raised in an age of gentility. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
Yes, I do. Why did the little boys have to wear the binder?
They supposedly to keep them encourage them to stand straight.
Stand straight.
Yes.
No slouching.
And a couple of others. When you are drinking tea, I know some have said to me, you add Queen Elizabeth adds the milk before she adds the tea. That was done in former days. The reason for that was because the teacups were very fragile. One had to add the milk so that the hot tea would not break would not force the cup to crack. And gloves. Ladies wore gloves during afternoon tea. They kept their gloves on for afternoon tea. So one had to be very careful about the way that they ate. And sometimes ladies would only drink tea because they were looking at the food served and realized their gloves would become soiled. But for dining, for dinner, the gloves were removed. We have here a topsy-turvy doll.
I had one of those.
Now the topsy-turvy doll is only supposed to have eyes. However, some little girl could not quite abide by that, and she had to draw in the nose and the mouth.
Make her complete.
We have books. Books came in various sizes, from large to medium to quite small. This is Cinderella. This is a book of hymns. A bit difficult to read. And then one last one, I'll end on a note about love letters. When a gentleman writes a love letter to a lady, he must do it with exceeding care. If there is so much as a T that is not properly crossed, his chances may be dashed. So has anyone, before I leave, any questions? Yes?
What type of jewelry did they wear back then?
I cannot answer that. I wish I could, but I cannot answer that. I don't know any specifics.
Yeah.
I do know that when a lady traveled, she kept the jewelry very simple, so as not to attract attention. But you see the brooches with the pins, rather large, silver. Yes, Sharon.
Didn't they keep people's, dead people's hair in their pins?
They did. Yes, a dead relative, someone dear to them. They would.
Sorry, brain slips. You said
They would
broke
incorporate.
and
They
I'm
would
thinking-
incorporate their hair into some of their jewelry. That's true.
What type of outfits or dresses did they wear if they weren't going out? So they were in for the day just to do their...
Something such as this. Did I show you the brown?
Oh, the brown, okay.
The brown they would wear. It would be something quite simple and something quite comfortable. They would still be corseted, but the corsets might not be pulled quite so tight. But it would be, and then as the turn of the century came, there were dresses called wraps or wraparounds, they would just wrap around you, very, very simple dresses. And for an afternoon tea with friends, a lady would dress quite simply in a day dress. But of course, if you went to dinner, then you would be quite a bit more dressed up.
So multiple changes.
Oh, multiple changes during the day,
During the
yes.
day.
Yes. And there's another note about afternoon tea. People thought that afternoon tea was simply a time for ladies to chat about Emily's hair that would not curl, or Johnny's sniffle that would not go away. But actually, afternoon tea spawned some important projects. Afternoon tea spawned prison reform. They spawned the building of schools and parks. And in one tea in 1849 in England, a lady named Katie Stanton mentioned that society may just benefit if women had the right to vote. And of course, that started the whole movement for women's suffrage. So, and one more. Oh, I have two photographs. I have a photograph album here. I don't know who these people are, but there are a couple of notes about the photographs. You will see in some photographs, the lady is seated. The gentleman is seated and the lady is standing. The gentleman has a steel rod up his back so that he will sit tall and straight. If the lady is standing with her hand on his shoulder on something, it is because it must be an older photograph. It took the photographer such a long time to take it that she needed something to keep herself steady. When you see photographs with the lady is standing without touching anything, with no need for any assistance, you know that it is a more recent photograph. It did not take quite as long to take. So I will be here if anybody has any questions. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you.